On blast.
I've got my chocolate milk. We've got our virtual backgrounds going. You know it's an exciting Wednesday night. I'm John Chidley Hill.
And I am Sheldon Alexander.
And this is You Killed It, the podcast about the challenge. This is a big second episode for Spies, Lies, and Allies.
Episode 2. And I'm still in. And it's good. I'm enjoying it.
I didn't realize that you might be out on the season after 2
No,
episodes.
do you know what it is? It's because the more and more I watch these new episodes of the challenge, I'm realizing how much they're switching kind of what the show was that we were used to.
Yeah, that's
We'll get there. But, you know, it's becoming a lot more, as we always talk about, Survivor, right? More so than like the challenge stuff. And we'll get there. But I'll say off the front end, I bet the Ashley thing was way worse than what they showed. The party scene that they had at the beginning, where they're showing everyone like dancing, getting down, having fun. I bet there was a lot more there going on. But you know what I mean? I still like it, obviously. I'm here. I love it. But I'm just acknowledging the difference. Like, they're keeping me in still. They're keeping me in.
Someone pointed this out, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who, and I have lost it in the mentions. My apologies to whoever it was. But they pointed out that part of the season, it's more than 50% Europeans or Africans. It's probably because it was easier with COVID-19 protocols to get people to Croatia if they were already in the European Union. I guess there's some Brits, which is complicated because of Brexit, but it's a good point. I also have to say, there's too many people on this season. There's people that they'll mention, and I'll be like, who? Who are you? What? Who?
There's got to be a purge at some point, right? Or this is just going to be a super long season. With both are possible.
Purge.
trying to recoup the money, right? As all businesses are right now, figuring out a way to recoup the money. So maybe we're in for a super long season of the challenge. But what I will say is we got a bunch of messages because the challenge after show, this one was from, and first off, we never say this off the front end, and we probably should, but wherever you're listening to this pod, remember to, it's not called subscribe anymore, but follow on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're getting this pod. You know, same thing goes for SoundCloud and on YouTube. You definitely can still like and subscribe there if you're ever listening to the pod. And I wanted to read this comment because when people write into us and, you know, they write something that's well thought out, I like to give them a bit of credit for that, right? Because you took the time to do that. The least we can do is take in, and we read them all, but we can add a little more to it and read it on the show. So this was from Sonia. Sonia wrote this, and this was off of a conversation we had last episode. And for the record, this is a great example of, doesn't always have to be glowing of something that we do. So Sonia says, y'all have to watch the challenge after show. You miss so much gameplay, discussion, understanding, and it twists wrongly your perceptions of the players. Case in point, the whole list debacle was started by Amanda. Emmy and Corey were the original ones that were slated for the House vote. Amanda went to Emmy looking for dirt on the rookies. Amanda told her she needs to spill to save herself. So Emmy told her about the list. Amanda rehearsed with Emmy about how to message the list into a big scandal and approach Tori and Anissa with it. Not to ingratiate herself with them, but to have them spread the info, and the vets would believe them because Anissa and Tori were well liked. The vets wanted to get out the rookies that were the biggest threats. They're not necessarily going after the Survivor U.S. players. They viewed Emmy and Corey as the biggest threats. Corey proved himself in the elimination. Emmy will prove herself throughout the season. So your thought that Renan and Michaela putting a target on their backs by coming in second during the daily challenge was wrong. Michaela's writing the list was to rally the rookies and unite the target to the vets. She did the same thing in Survivor. writing the hit list in the sand. Jay, who was in an alliance with her, got rid of her before she could notice he's not really in her alliance. Michaela talks too freely with people she doesn't know too well. She's smart and strategic and has leadership abilities. The vets didn't want her skills to be used against them in their plans. I really like your podcast. We don't have the full view of the game as discussed by the players. They don't hide anything except for spoilers, and sometimes they slip. Watching the after the challenge would immensely improve your podcast. P.S. Nam got COVID. Josh's partner, Lauren, is getting the D edit. Supposedly she said something racist. Sonia, there's a lot there.
I mean,
first thing
Sonia,
I'm going to say.
Go ahead, Shelly.
Well, first thing I was going to say is I purposely, if you listen to this pod a lot, we talk about spoilers and all that a lot, right? And I always say I never want to listen to spoilers. I never really want to so I understand the point of, hey, watch the after show because there's a bunch of other things that go on. But that's not really what I want to do with the pod. I enjoyed the pod as us giving what our thoughts are with the information that we have all the time at the time in real time. Do you know what I mean? So Tonight, for example, I watched the show live and then there was a bit of time before we were about to record and I saw the after show pop up on my timeline. I clicked it on and it was okay. There's nothing much. There's nothing crazy that happened in it. So it's going to be hit or miss. But in no way, and I know what you're going to say as well, would we be making a commitment to be like, oh, we're going to watch the after show? Not a chance. And I don't want to. I want to come on here, and this might sound weird, be wrong about stuff. That's the fun of us doing this pod. It's not about us trying to be right or trying to be like, hey, we're the smartest guys in the room. We know what they should or shouldn't have done. So I'm fine with you telling us that we were wrong. I'm cool with that. I'm okay with that.
I mean, we are the smartest guys in the room, but no,
we're the only guys in the room, right? We are the only guys in this room right now.
That's true.
As we record this, right? So.
I'm just kidding, Sonia. I appreciate all the feedback, but I agree with Sheldon. Part of the premise of our podcast is that we focus on how the show is presented within the confines of the show proper. Right? Like we are operating under how the editors show us, choose to show us the narrative, how the producers choose to show us the narrative. Sheldon works harder at avoiding spoilers than I do. I follow a lot of people on Instagram and I'm a little more into the gossip than Sheldon is, I think. But yeah, I don't like it. That's interesting. And I think our listeners, if they need more, should be watching the after show. But I don't necessarily want all that behind the scenes detail. I sort of part of the fun for me is you and I, Sheldon, guessing and then finding out later if we were right. Yeah. And I don't mind being wrong. Right. Totally. And obviously I appreciate all the listener feedback. And by all means, you guys can tell us that we're wrong. It happens. We're not infallible.
Totally fine with
it. We also, listener and real life friend, Nick Ashburn, did a little scouting report for us. If you do not know Nick, he is a fellow sports reporter who reports on the Toronto Blue Jays and basically did a scouting report of some of the new competitors. So I thought I would read out what Nick has for us. And and we'll just keep things moving. He says, Kelz from Too Hot to Handle, this is Nick's opinion, I think he came off as just another meathead in episode 1, but I suspect he wins over the audience by the end. On Too Hot to Handle, which the premise is, it's a bunch of hot people who come together and can't do anything sexual at this retreat or they lose money from a prize pool. He basically didn't link up with anyone and dubbed himself the accountant, trying to protect the money. He really leaned into that persona, and it was quite funny at times. He has a dry sense of humor that can come through. And he says of Michelle, that she's one of the most masterful social players in Survivor history. That might not come through in this game, where pre-existing relationships dictate alliances so much, but she's unbelievable at just staying alive for another week, then another, even when it looks like she's under the gun. Super resourceful and surprisingly throws in the occasional physical win. Don't know if she has raw endurance to excel in a final, but if so, I could see her as a winner or big time player if given more of an opportunity. Tommy, also from Survivor, won one of the worst seasons of Survivor in recent history with a highly social game. I have to say, I appreciate that insight. I can't get into Survivor. Like, I'll watch Big Brother, but so thank you, Nick. Thanks for doing that dirty work for us.
Yeah, greatly appreciated.
He says that Tommy was very good at persuading others and keeping the target off of himself, but Nick's not sure if you'll have the same success with smarter people. Didn't really impress in challenges, but later claimed he threw some to avoid being seen as a threat. It's unclear if that's true. That's usually not a great strategy in Survivor. Anyway, I don't expect him to do much. And then Michaela actually really liked her on Survivor, but how things played out makes a lot of sense. She always has tons of potential with her combination of brains and athletic ability, but would do too much or say too much and get the target on her. I was hoping she'd learn her lesson, but nope. So thank you, Nick. I appreciate the background.
Yeah, totally agree. And especially in an episode or in a season where there's so many people, getting those little background notes help and give you sort of context in terms of who you should be rooting for. And someone off the front end, Ed, who comes in to this episode, starts it off pretty early in episode 2. I actually wrote this down that he seems like a bootleg Johnny Bananas. I don't know why, but those are just the vibes I was getting. I don't know.
I noted that he looks like Matthew McConaughey and toxic positivity had a child.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Fair
enough.
I think we don't like Ed, but we'll talk about that more.
Yeah, for sure. I'm still, if we're debating how we feel about Ed, how do we feel about Gabbo? Because he's still kicking this narrative of when I was a kid I saw Jersey Shore, and then it became my dream to be on American television. And I wrote, you know what? Dreams do come true, Gabbo. Dreams do come true. Is that a real thing? Is that actually possible?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell. I'm not trying to be here to tell anyone else what their dream should be. I'm here on a Wednesday night at almost midnight taping a podcast about a random TV show. So I'm not going to be here telling anyone else what their dreams should or shouldn't be. But I just find it hilarious that my guy is like, I grew up watching Jersey Shore and my dream was to be on American television.
I think that's a real dream.
Okay.
I believe Gabbo. As I keep saying, I think I said this to you before we started recording. His name always reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons with Gabbo is coming.
Oh, yes.
And again, sorry to cut you off, but again, with this season having too many cast members, this is the last we see of Gabbo, aside from the daily competition. Like, we get some reacts from him and like reaction shots, not even like confessionals or whatever. Like, he's just, that's it. That's Gabbo's scene. And also, how awkward is it that he just like walks into the room and he basically says to Ed, "So what's your deal?" Like,
well, do you know what's funny? And I hate doing this, but that to me showed that a producer got him to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like they get back into the house and then everyone's kind of hanging out and it's like, hey, we need someone to give us a bit of background on Ed. Go in and ask him what's his deal. Hey, Gabbo, you're getting no type of airtime. Why don't you go check it out? So
I also, with Ed and Nelson, like, they don't have two brain cells to read between them. Like, how did your guy Ed describe himself? A genius in disguise. I'll believe it when I see it.
Hey, I mean, he was off to a good start. Off to a good start, though. I don't know about the dance party. There's a long line of us talking about the dance parties, and this is what I mean as well. We got to see some people's moves. We got to see some people hanging out, and it was cool, but I need more. As someone who on this pod consistently will always talk about how much I love the club scenes, how much it means to me on the challenge episodes. I felt like it was long. I felt like there was a lot going on, but it wasn't. I don't know. I felt like the one part was edited. The one part where Tori does the flip, like they strategically cut around that. And that further goes to my point of old school MTV. They would have shown exactly what she was doing because I think we know exactly what she was doing, right?
Yep. I have a question for specifically our American listeners, which would have affected this scene.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
What music is playing?
Yeah.
Because up here in the True North Strong and Free, it's just like generic, like...
Oh, yeah.
Like
generic like music.
Yeah, like it's not by anyone. It has no lyrics. Mm-hmm. And we've learned the hard way that seemingly in the United States, they're getting actual music. So please, American listeners, tell us, was there actually, because like if there's like...
No, of course there was.
Like if
without a doubt there was.
They're playing like WAP. It makes it a different scene.
You're right. And that, you know what? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what's been going on the past few seasons with the club scenes. Even when we go back to the Liquor Dome and whatever else has been going on, I haven't been feeling the club scenes because the music has been so trash. And so I'm seeing them like dance, but I'm not believing it. I'm not buying into it enough. Interesting.
My follow-up question is for you, my dear co-host. Last season, 2 seasons ago, we referred to it as the Liquor Dome.
Yeah.
What are we going to call their party space this season?
I don't know. I need more time.
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
I'm just spitballing here. It's more of a tropical destination this season. How about Sea Lounge?
Wasn't that an actual spot here?
Yes, it was.
It was,
after the dearly departed Cabana pool bar that was on Wellington, west of Spadina, in the early 2000s. I'm just spitballing. I'm not married to the idea. I'm just trying to come up with something.
The one thing we should mention too, right? Like there's 2 different club scenes, right?
Yeah.
Like one, they were just partying at the house.
Yeah.
There's one they were partying at the house, and then there's the other one at an actual spot. So we got some time. And I like your music theory. Your music theory has made me rethink this whole thing. My whole thought process, your music theory. So it's interesting. I need people to let us know what's going on. Also, I think someone needs to let Ashley know what's going on. Because, like, we see your man's Nelly. We know Nelly's going to be Nelly. Him and Berna, they got something going on. But somehow we see Nelson get up. They give us a key that shows, the words pop on the screen that say 30 minutes later. And I kind of skipped over it because there's a couple other things that we're missing, right? Like, it seems like Michelle likes a vampire dude. Also, we talked about Tori and Kelz. We see them cuddling and seeing all that. But the big relationship drama surrounds Nelson. So Nelson is hanging out with Berna, and then we see it says 30 minutes later, he slides into Ashley's bed. Immediately, okay? From last episode when this came up, we knew this wasn't going to go well. But at this moment, what do you make of Nelson's work here where he's, he's doubling up in the same night? What are your thoughts?
It's the sloppiest thing I've ever seen. It is beyond stupid. There's no way that this will work out well for him at all.
No.
And he keeps saying in confessionals, Ashley knows what it is. We're free agents. Buddy, might be the case. I don't think it is. And later in this episode, it becomes clear that it is not the case from Ashley's perspective.
Yeah.
But even still, even if they truly were just sex, no feelings, no one wants to feel like a second choice.
Yeah. And listen, anytime that comes up, oh, we know what we're doing. We're just friends. Like, come on. Let's be serious. That only lasts for so long.
That's a very hard needle to thread.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Nelson does not have the parts to thread that needle. And also, when you add in the personalities involved, and like you and I like Smashley. She's been on we're like, I'm a fan of hers.
Totally.
But she is not the calmest, coolest, most collected person at the best of times.
Yeah.
I do want to read at a listener comment, Carrie B, reacting to me saying, I think I like Nelson, goes, I just want us all to keep in mind, we always say, I think I'm starting to like Nelson in the beginning.
It's true.
Now, last season, he and Fessy swapped likability roles, so we shall see. We period shall period see period. Well, Carrie, you said that on August 13th. It's now August 18th. And I have to tell you, you were correct.
Didn't take long, did it? You know what it is? When back in my younger days, when we would go out from time to time, you go to the club, you know, we would always have these conversations. You know, you have your guy talking. I'm pretty sure the same thing probably goes for women as well, right? But we would call it ping-ponging. You're going back and forth. You got to focus. You got to focus. Can't be ping-ponging. Ping-ponging, at the end of the night, you end up by yourself. And getting the feeling, Nelson, this ping-ponging that you're doing right now, it's not going to work out. But, hey, that was just early on in the episode. As we know, there's more. And most importantly, people remember to let us know what the music was during the party.
Please. So help me God, Sheldon, if they were listening to 112 and we missed it, I'm going to flip the fuck out. You know how we feel about 112.
Well played. Well played.
Sorry, there's one thing I need to talk about. You sort of glossed over that, and I can't cope with it. Michelle says she's confused by her attraction to Emmanuel. And I have to admit, Sheldon, I'm also confused by her attraction to Emmanuel. Someone pointed out, Chauncey says that his wife pointed out that Emmanuel looks like the bad guy in Meet the Robinsons, and now he can't unsee it. And I have to say, I agree.
Yeah.
He also looks like an extra from Peaky Blinders.
Yeah, he looks like an interesting character, and I don't know what to make of Michelle yet. Obviously I don't watch Survivor, so I don't know her from that show. I did happen to catch an Instagram live randomly last week that was Michelle. I guess she does like normal Instagram lives weekly, like a show. And she had on Amanda and Ashley. And it seemed fun. Like they seemed like a pretty funny crew. Like, so, you know, she seems like good peoples. If we're gauging this off what we do on this show, and two people that we obviously like are Amanda and Ashley, and if they're co-signing her, okay, cool. Seems like cool people so far, minus the whole vampire thing. We just got to see where this goes.
I'll also say something that Michelle did that I liked and thought was good gameplay was the morning, I assume after the elimination, she speaks to Tracy, because after all, she'd stolen Devin from Tracy, and she apologizes for taking him. And Tracy says in confessional she hopes to get Devin back at some point. But I thought this was a good move by Michelle to try to clear the air. And like, as you and I always say, you don't want to do anything that attracts unwanted attention. And just smooth over anything you can, show some humility, keep it moving. It's smart.
Totally makes sense. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with your man's Kelz lifting mad weight and Tori saying that she's doing booty weight. But let's get to some strategy during this episode, right? So there's vets in the room. You got Nani, Ashley, Josh, Amanda, Fessy, and Casey. And we're seeing the actual follow through of what was talked about in the previous episode, where they got to just get focused on the vets working together.
Yep.
And immediately the plan comes that they should take out Kelz. And I thought that was very interesting because I was so focused on, it's cool that you want to take him out, but who is actually going to take him out? Right? That's the part that I kept thinking of. But what did you make of the plan? And do you have faith in this vet plan that they will be able to stick together?
No, I don't think so. But I think they'll be able to hold it together for a few weeks.
Okay.
Because I think the personalities involved are pretty good when you look at that veteran alliance. Put another way, aside from Nelson and Fessy's issues, the veterans get along, right? Like Devin and Josh have buried the hatchet. Aside from that, everyone generally likes each other, right? Like Tori and Devin will like playfully bicker, but they like each other, right? Otherwise, who else has major beef? I mean, there's beef brewing between Nelson and Ashley, but like at this point, it hasn't blown up yet. Aside from that, there's no Wes Johnny Bananas dynamic. There's no Jordan and Wes. There's no Jordan and lots of people. There's no Zach. There's no
especially with Devin and Josh agreeing that they're going to work together for sure. Definitely agree. And again, I keep saying the Fessy rebrand here, right? We get another scene of Fessy, just talking about how difficult it's been for him dealing with doing the challenge while also doing Ramadan and not eating, or basically he's fasting, right? Not basically, he's fasting. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't like Fessy. I think the record shows, and I am not buying into the Fessy redemption tour, but I will say I have a lot of respect for him doing that. It would not be easy to fast. And, he, in his first season on the challenge, he made the point that it is a big deal that he's a Muslim and has such a prominent place like on TV. I don't think there have been any other Muslims on the challenge. I can't think of any. Maybe I'm missing someone, but it's impressive.
Yeah, it's very interesting for sure. It's definitely very interesting. I'm laughing because every time we go to, I'm laughing, and I didn't mean for that to be the awkward transition as we were just talking about something super serious, but TJ and the cars and the helicopter and all that, like, what is the budget? Like, I would love to see the breakdown of what the budget is per episode, per challenge, per shoot day, whatever it is. I want to see what the budget is because I keep laughing at the fact that TJ shows up and it's another episode of the Fast and the Furious. My guy's here and the helicopter's coming in now. In this instance, a helicopter is actually part of the challenge, right? But the crazy car, like, there's no need for him to come in that car, but it just looks cool. And I thought there was a lot of
US dollars go a lot further in Croatia than they do here or in North America.
Totally.
I'm just saying, I think it'd be easier to get a hold of all this stuff over there. Yeah. Like, have you ever seen Eurotrip? Like, there's a joke where like the guy flips his bellhop a quarter and the bellhop slaps the boss and quits to start his own hotel.
Yeah.
I don't think that's quite the case.
No. But I got you. So what did you think of this daily challenge? Basically, you and your partner, one person has to be in the helicopter. The other person is standing out of the sunroof of an SUV. And the person in the helicopter has to drop jewels in a bag down to the person that's out of the sunroof. And while you're doing that, the SUV is like driving around certain obstacles at certain points. You got to collect as many gems as you can and then run across the finish line. Person or the team with the most gems and does it the fastest wins. What did you make of this challenge? Because I thought it looked really cool, but I still think it was probably harder than it came across.
I'm going to answer your question, but first I have to tell you that you can rent a Lamborghini in Croatia for 1,100 euro per day, just for a ballpark. So Actually not that bad.
Not bad.
I was really surprised by how much I liked this competition, because at first I was like, this doesn't seem that complicated. It seemed pretty straightforward, but it was more complicated. Like, it was harder, right? Like, to gauge the speed, you have to include the wind, the cars. It's not just that they're moving in a straight line; they're sort of dodging obstacles.
Yep.
So yeah, and it was very cinematic. And what I've liked about the competition so far is that it's not, and like we'll see it in the elimination as well, it's not straight up like physical strength. I was interested that both Emmy and Big T struggle with heights. Talk about, I mean, Big T sort of addressed the height issues in the past, but Emmy, you're on the wrong show if you don't like heights. Like, it is only going to get worse.
And speaking of only going to get worse, I feel like it's only going to get worse with Emmy. She seems to be just a lot. Like, that's just a lot. And we'll get there for sure. But I mean, I can't say a lot and just gloss over. I'm going to be honest with you. The thing that stuck out to me the most in this whole entire daily challenge, because this isn't really the challenge where we would normally go through and like break down how everyone did, because you can't, because it's kind of just the same.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, right?
And everyone was pretty close in terms of the numbers. Obviously, there's a couple teams that stood out, but
yeah. But like, nothing stood out in terms of like entertaining that we need to talk about, other than your girl, Corey's partner with the laugh, Bettina.
It's really,
I told you guys about it last week, right? I did bring this up last week because it wasn't in the actual episode. That was in the preview episode, right? I'm pretty sure it was in the preview episode, but we got it on full gauge, and it was just the greatest. Like, it's my line of the episode, and I know it's not a line, but it was Corey's face. Corey's face, because she starts laughing, so that tells you it was kind of a bit, right? Corey was like, oh yeah, she's gonna laugh after. And then she just kept going and going and going, and the look on Corey's face, it's like, oh, he's like, oh wait, like, that's for real? You're still
this
going?
is real life.
Like, what? Like, that's not like, what is happening here? That was the best. That I thought was amazing. That made me laugh. That was the thing to me that stood out about the whole entire challenge.
I mean, she sounds like a dolphin.
I don't even know what that sounds like. I've never heard anything like that before in my life.
I mean, you can't help how you laugh, but man,
I'd like to think there's something she could do about that. There's got to be. Like, that's too much. That is too much, if you ask me.
The story, there's a couple other things that stood out to me that I want to address. First of all, Jeremiah is super fast. Like, and he says that he's a track star. I know the vets are focused right now on Kelz, but if I saw Jeremiah run like that, I would be moving him up my list of people to take out.
I was actually kind of surprised that they didn't try to put him against Kelz. Like,
Yeah.
I just assumed that if that was going to be if you're going to try to do that, you're going to try to get rid of one of them at least, right? But I don't know. I found that kind of weird. Obviously, the other thing that stood out as well was Josh's partner left. We don't really get an explanation as to what happened. And in fact, when they said Lauren, I couldn't even tell you what Lauren looks like. I don't remember who that person is.
I had the same note. I was also intrigued that they all said that they were really impressed with Emmanuel, that he might be the second strongest of the rookies. And like, in fairness, I understand their concern. Mm-hmm. After all, the lair, like the eliminations, always happen at night when presumably he'd be at his strongest.
Yep.
And unless you see like garlic and like a cross, maybe some silver bullets as part of the elimination, like you're really taking a gamble against that guy, right?
Yeah, that guy trips me out. I don't know if I would want to be in the same room as him. Like, the guy trips me out for real. But yeah, I was mentioning that because Amber B is back, man.
Yeah.
You can't just gloss over that.
And looking fantastic. Like, I can't tell you what's different between and she looked great last season, but this season, holy.
Whew. If you go back to last season, I was like mesmerized by Amber B because of Big Brother, right? Like, her appearance on Big Brother was still incredible. And she came on this season like that, however much money she won has her feeling good. The smile is ear to ear. She looks incredible, like absolutely incredible. Good to have her back on the challenge and on my TV screen.
I have a question though. Well, you might not know about this because I know that you don't dive into the gossip like I do. But I'm pretty sure she and Nelson had a thing.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know.
I don't know that I can find it, but there was a video of the two of them hanging out together, having wine. And I'm not sure I've ever seen sexual tension so thick.
I mean, I feel like if that's the case, it's probably going to come out at some point this season. So there's no way that wouldn't come out during this season, especially with what Nelson's got going on right now. So if that's a thing, that's a thing, right? I could definitely see it.
There's certainly like articles out there about like maybe they are dating.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. We'll find out. We found out that the winners of said challenge, Fessy and Esther, just beating out Casey and your man's Emmanuel. And Esther is hype. Her confessional, she's hype, saying she's the first Nigerian to ever win a daily challenge. Fessy is emotional as well because he's clearly nervous about how if him fasting is going to affect his performance in the daily challenges. And so he was super emotional when he won. But what do you think of the duo of Fessy and Esther?
I was really impressed with Esther because we glossed over this. When Fessy was talking about observing Ramadan, she was saying how nervous she was for the daily competition. Mm-hmm. But she really made it happen. Like, she was rifling those gems down to Fessy. Yeah. And after all, he was like an NFL caliber tight end prospect.
According to him, yes.
According to him. But I was really impressed with their teamwork. Again, I'm impressed that Fessy was doing so well, given that he is fasting. Esther is really growing on me. And one thing before we move on from this competition that I want to touch on, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but one of the windshields of one of the SUVs was shattered. Did you notice that?
No.
It did. Like, I don't know if it was shattered beforehand or what, but like, it's clearly like you can see that there's like a spider web of cracks. And I don't know if it's getting hit by one of the gems, but like, I think they had some weight to them. Like, I don't think it was an easy catch. I can't imagine that they, like, wherever they rented those cars from or wherever the drivers came from, I can't imagine that for insurance reasons they would just show up with like a severely cracked windshield. So it must have happened during shooting.
Yeah.
But
no, that would make sense. That definitely would make sense.
What did you think of Fessy and Esther?
I really like Esther. I just like Esther's energy. I think she's a good partner. She's always going to give it her all. She's not afraid. She seems to want the smoke of the challenge, which is incredible. And she knows how much this matters, right? Like, I like that she appreciates a deeper level of being the first Nigerian person on, or being the first wave of Nigerian people, because obviously she's not the only one on this season. But I love that. I think that's amazing. And Fessy had to learn from last season, right? You could kind of tell so far how he's dealing with Esther. It's a lot different than how he dealt with his partners last season. And it's early. There hasn't been adversity yet for him, but he seems calmed in the Fessy rebrand. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, we'll have to see, but like, it's a good start for him.
Mm-hmm. Not a good start for Corey, as Corey and Fessy's relationship. There's not a good start real there, because Corey admits that he can't trust Fessy. Then on the same side, you have Josh and Amber talking, and Josh is going to try to mend the fence between Fessy and Amber and Casey and Amber from last season. And if people remember, or if you're just brand new to this season of the challenge, what happened on last season was Amber was a part of the Big Brother Alliance, but she was at the bottom of the totem pole. She just didn't know it. And so while the other side of the house was trying to tell her that, she wasn't listening, and she trusted the Big Brother Alliance, and they tried to dispose of her. And in fact, her beef with Fessy was Fessy he put himself in to switch partners right before the elimination so that he could get, he didn't put himself in. He put Casey in, right? So that Casey could pick him and steal him away from Amber. And then we all know what happened. Amber ends up winning. So there's beef there. Like, Amber, even though it worked out for her and she won, you could tell she still doesn't mess with Fessy. And that, to me, is a ticking time bomb that's going to blow up at some point.
Yeah. And might affect the Veteran Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Josh says to Amber, because now they're partners, says to Amber that he has no issues with her. And honestly, like, I think he's actually pretty sincere when he says that. But I also think he's kidding himself when he says in confessional that he thinks he can bring everyone in the Big Brother Alliance back together. Because here's the thing. Amber's anger towards Fessy and Casey is really based off of conversations that were on the last season of the show. Mm-hmm. And like, good for Amber for actually watching back the tape and was like, no, this is like a candid conversation you two had. Yeah. Like, this is like, that was real. Like, Amber, don't let them gaslight you. And you and I were outspoken last season about the fact that Amber was making a mistake. It ended up working out for her, but I'm glad she sees them for who they are. Like, I'm glad she's not saying to herself, well, it doesn't matter because I won.
Yeah.
Right. Like, she won because she ended up with CT and because of her own skill and strength as a runner and just doing well in the actual final. So, like, she won despite them, not because of them. And I'm glad she has that straight.
Yeah. Let's move on and let's get to, I guess, one of the main events of this episode. And that's your man's what's going on with Nelly and Ashley. And we got a glimpse of what was going to happen earlier, because when Nelson finished his daily challenge, he came over and Burnout was there to kind of hug him. And then Ashley came over to kind of, get some Nelly of her own as well. And then you fast forward to later on, we get the second club scene and they're having a conversation, a full-on conversation. And Ashley admits to him, I think I'm catching feelings for you. And Nelson is thrown off guard. I'm thrown off guard. But do you think that she actually was catching feelings for him, or she could sense Berna coming? And so then when that's when she tries to, up her game.
I think a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, and Ashley herself suggests maybe she's got the Challenge House goggles. maybe she's feeling some kind of way because she's in the challenge house, you know, a little lonely, a little horny, a little stressed out, you know?
Definitely. I think Ashley, there is a little form of human nature here where you're sensing the competition. And so you step your game up. And Nelson tells her, like, come on, that's not us. That's not what we're doing. Blah, blah, blah. Tries to talk her out of it. But then immediately goes right over to Berna. And then you know how this is going to end. It doesn't really look good. And we'll get to the Kelz stuff in the club with Fessy when we get to the deliberation. But let's just round out what ends up happening with Ashley and Nelson. Because they get back to the house and Nelson's being Nelson, right? He's trying to slide over to Berna, even though I'm pretty sure he calls her Bertha.
Yeah.
A couple times.
They all call them Bertha. Like Amber and Ashley both call her Bertha.
Yeah. Exactly. But Ashley's not having this. Ashley starts to melt down and you can see the drunken goggles are on. You could tell the Remy's in the system and she was dissing them. Right? Like that's what she was doing. It was expected, but I almost felt bad for Ashley because there's one point where Nelson actually says to her, I'm trying to save you right now. And he says it and then he kind of pauses and holds back. But the way that I took that was he's saying, I'm trying to save you from looking dumb right now.
Yeah. Because
in his mind, like, it's not that serious. He knows she doesn't really, really care, but he also knows that she's drunk in the moment and she's just, going to make herself look bad.
I feel bad for Ashley and like it's Nelson obviously is on the wrong here. And I'll tell you what the number one piece of evidence is that Nelson's in the wrong. He said it last episode. Ashley moved to Austin. Just down the street from him. He lives in Austin. Mm-hmm. They are having relations. They then go on the same season and continue to have relations. At his, like he, at least the one time we saw, he initiated it. I know he wants to say he's single. I know he wants to say they're just friends. Buddy, she moved to Austin, Texas. Your presence there certainly played a role in that decision.
Yeah.
Corey says it in confessional, and it's like, Nelson, like, you got to talk to both of these women. You don't want to lead Ashley on. You don't want to lead Burnout on. Nelson, and like, hey, honestly, the situation's relatable. I think anyone that's listening to this podcast over the age of 30, maybe over the age of 20, has been the Ashley in the situation, has been the Nelson in the situation, and has been the Burnout in the situation. And like, it's relatable. But Nelson is making the mistake here. Ultimately, it's on him. He should be staying away from Berna, or he should be straight up with Ashley, and certainly not initiating coitus with her 30 minutes after getting cozy with Berna.
Yeah. Which was kind of funny when Amanda's confronting her about it the next morning. And she just kind of, because Nani was in the bunk beside them. And Amanda's kind of like, wait, were both of you getting it on last night in the bottom bunk? Super funny. But you're right. Nelson, I say Nelson's at fault here because he has to know that ultimately this is going to fall on him, right? Ultimately it's going to fall on him, and you're just messing up your own game, which also makes no sense. But speaking of the game, there's something else big going on, and that's from the club, but then back into the house. This is Operation How Do We Get Kelz Out of the House, which obviously, Fessy went up to him in the club. And this kind of points to what we were talking about at the very front end about Kelz being pretty smart. Because this conversation with Fessy in the club, I thought was super interesting. Mm-hmm. Fessy comes to him and he's trying to make a deal. right? But he says it in a kind of slick way, like, two of us, we're kind of like the biggest guys in the house, and people are expecting us to go at each other. But I think if it'd be smart if we just come together and say, hey, I'm not going to come at you if you don't come at me. And he didn't say it like that, but much like I just said, Kelz puts that together. He's like, oh, I get what you're trying to say, but I don't really buy that because you're only coming to me now because you're in a position of power. And so how real do I take that? And I thought that was super interesting because he's correct, but it's also bold to call it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that?
Well, I mean, I was impressed with Kelz this episode. I thought his read of the whole situation from start to finish was correct. Like, he got sort of swept away by events, but I don't think he could have done anything differently. And in that scene in the club in Sea Lounge, you could see that, first of all, he was, I believe, the more sober of the two. Okay. And he also was, as soon as like Fessy started to say, like, we're similar, we shouldn't go after each other, like, Kelz had a look on his face that was like, no. Like, fuck no. Yeah. What I think is interesting, and I had this in my notes, I swear, I'll screen cap it for you, Sheldon, was that this is a good plan. The problem is Josh is too involved in the plan. And Josh is not the master manipulator he thinks he is. Right? And
but neither is Fessy.
Neither's Fessy. And again, like, I stand by what I said, being impressed with Fessy doing these competitions while fasting. That'd be incredibly difficult. And there's going to be, they always have a mini final, right? Yeah. The mini final is going to be hell on him. But also, fasting all day and then having alcohol at night, not a great combination. Like, Fessy doesn't strike me as a guy who can hold his liquor particularly well, given what we've seen on this show. Mm-hmm. But to go all day without food or water, and like sweating and everything, and then drinking, like, not to tell him how to run his life, but maybe abstain from drinking too while you're fasting, when you're in this environment, right, where you are like trying to make game decisions and like keep a good head on your shoulders. Because I think Fessy kind of blew it with Kelz in the club. And then when your tag team partner in all this is Josh, not a great combo.
Yeah, and also just the fact that you obviously had the conversation with Kelz and then you go right to Josh afterwards to like huddle up. Probably not a good look, probably a dead giveaway of what you're doing. But again, also, Kelz wasn't buying it anyways. And as you head into the deliberation now, Josh comes up with, again, outlining the plan. So you got to remember, two things are going on, right? Fessy went to Kelz, and Fessy's plan probably wasn't that bad. Kelz just read through it. Josh's plan in the deliberation was very interesting because Josh comes out and he's saying, I've been hearing from a lot of people. And anytime you're hearing from a lot of people, chances are there's not a lot of people, right? But Josh claims he's hearing from a lot of people that Kelz has been trying to make deals with everybody. And how did you take this whole scene? Because I thought Kelz, if he handled himself well with Fessy in this moment against Josh, I thought it was perfect what he said to Josh.
He handled himself so well. He almost, I can't say that he almost flipped the house, but it seemed like he put in some significant work persuading people. I also want to give a shout out to Priscilla.
You know what he did, though? Do you know what he really did? He put the other rookies on notice.
Yeah.
Let them know, hey, this is what's really going on. This is the game that's being played. Look at what they're doing to me. If we don't get our ish together, that could be you. And just the way that Josh, he called out Josh saying, hold on, you're not really the mastermind. Like, that's not your game. So even if I was planning something, you wouldn't be the one to uncover it. And I thought that was just amazing logic, truthful logic, so much so to the fact that Josh's homegirl, Tori, is trying her hardest to not laugh. She sits right in front of Josh as he's getting called out. And then on top of that, Kelz says, well, there is no plan, that I haven't been going to people. So why don't you just admit that you don't want to go against me, man? You're afraid of me. And fine. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
I have a lot of questions coming from this whole scene. My first question is, after Josh gets ethered by Kelz, and it's not a season until Josh gets absolutely murked by someone in deliberations. Devin, who's part of the veteran plan, who's working with Josh and by extension Fessy on this plan, he sort of steps in to say, well, then who should we nominate? Kelz. And Kelz doesn't have a response.
Yeah.
Why wasn't the plan all along to have Devin introduce the idea of nominating Kelz? Because Devin is better than either Josh or Fessy at these kinds of manipulations. And also, Devin's one step further removed from Fessy. Josh and Fessy working together, everyone will be like, of course. Devin and Fessy working together, people will be like, oh, I guess. You know what I mean?
I do think Devin coming in to help Josh helped their plan along.
Oh, for sure it did.
Right? And so I think it's probably better to have Josh go do that, just because it's more messy. And if you're Devin, ultimately, you want to be the guy behind the guy. Yeah, Devin's messy, but you don't want to be the messiest guy. So let Josh do that. And Devin just come in with kind of more calm down logic in terms of, well, who do you want to go in? Who should go in? Let's hear from you. And it's a perfect play from Devin, because it comes off as if he's being considerate to giving him an opportunity, giving Kelz an opportunity. But really all he's doing is making Kelz throw himself under the bus by saying someone else's name.
Yeah.
It's actually quite genius.
I'm going to tell you what they should have done. I'm going to tell you what I would have done.
Okay.
So you have this alliance, and we sort of skipped this scene, but Devin and Anissa went to Tori and basically were like, hey, FYI, your friend there, he's going to be on the chopping block. You don't have to vote with us, but we, as a courtesy, we want to give you a heads up. And Tori even says, this is a trust exercise. I'm getting tested by the other vets to see if I'll spill the beans to Kelz. She does not spill the beans. But if I was in the vet's shoes, what I would do is I would not call out Kelz at all. What I would do is I would try to start a fight, a divisive fight, like we saw between Michelle, Michaela, and Emmy last week. And then let all the rookies vote how they're going to vote, split the vote, knowing that all the veterans are just going to vote in Kelz.
Interesting.
Right? So have the rookies sort of eliminate their own votes by I don't know, half voting for Tommy and half voting, and I guess it's Tommy and Big T, and the other half voting for, I don't know, Emmy and Ed, as an example. Let them split the vote and then just count on all the vets voting for Kelz. I don't think
we'll see some of that down the line.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't think you have to even do what Josh did or what Devin sort of backed him up on. I don't think you even have to introduce it, as long as you know, hey, we've got 9 solid votes here. We just have to have fewer votes out there. Right?
No, totally makes sense. And hey, at the end of the day, Kelz ends up being the vote. So maybe they did something right. I don't know. There's a lot of bargaining going on, who's going in, who's not going in, but it ends up being Emmy for the women and Ed for the men. The one thing I did see from the after show was that they did tell Ed ahead of time he was going in. Before they start though, TJ, because he's one of the best hosts there is on television, says, "So Emmy, how do you feel about this?" And Emmy says, "Well, Mr. TJ," and I'm not going to lie to you, after that, I have no idea what she said. There's just a lot of crying. There's a lot of like, she was just sad. And it's not even that I couldn't understand what she was saying. It was that I tuned out because I was trying to figure out why she keep calling him Mr. TJ. That's what really threw me off.
Because she's respectful.
Sure. But like,
I don't know.
It was just a weird look. Like, she is just all over the place. She had she started melting down during the elimination. Now the same thing's happening, or not the elimination, the daily challenge. Now the same thing's happening in the elimination. And it's like, that's not the right headspace to be in before you start an elimination. But hey, I think she just had a really good partner, to be honest.
Well, I'm not a big Ed fan, and I will say Emmy impressed me because she pulled it together after that emotional outburst. Mm-hmm. So the competition was called Flip the Agent. So one person is strapped to a sort of, I don't know, cage. It looks like a torture device. Big T was into it. She liked the dungeon vibes. Mm-hmm. So in both cases, the teams decided to have the woman strapped to this board. And so is the man's job to flip the agent in Ed and Emmy's case. So Emmy gets flipped. They have a magnet on the end of a rope that attaches to the puzzle pieces that they have to then draw up to them. And then their partner flips them back. They hand the puzzle piece over, repeat. And it's really like, it was a more physical competition than I expected. Like, it was, when they were explaining it, I didn't see how grueling it would be, how demanding. Like, Emmy and Tracy were both complaining about how hard it was on their stomachs, like with the restraints and everything. There was more to this than I expected.
Totally. And even at the beginning, you could see how tough it must have been for Tracy, because Kelz had no regard for her flipping back. Like, he was dropping her like so hard. Whereas when you saw what Ed was doing, Ed was like bracing the fall. So when it flipped all the way back, he was holding it and like bringing it down slowly. Whereas there are a couple of times where Tracy was just smashing back into the ground. And on top of that, add in the fact that Kelz was kind of yelling at her at the beginning and just not being a good partner. And I honestly think that kind of was the difference early on. I mean, I think, honestly, so what ends up happening, as you know, Ed and Emmy are out to a huge lead, and then Tracy kind of gets into a groove using the magnet, and they catch up, and it's basically they're both on the same last magnet at the same time. But Emmy figures out how to roll the magnetic side over on her last block, and that's how she was able to pick it up and win, and at least, get them to the puzzle part first. And Ed just took care of it from there, where it ends up being a world map. And it's pretty funny as he gets all the pieces and Devin yells across, "Ed, it's a map of the world." And he's like, "I know." Thanks.
They didn't address this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ed was putting the puzzle together or organizing the puzzle pieces while Emmy was facing down. I think that's the move. Like, make the most of your time. At least have all the puzzle pieces facing the right way. Because time is of the essence. I was impressed with Ed and Emmy. They're still not my favorite people on this show. I will say, longtime listener Julia Lamana says, "How much do we love Kelz clap back to Josh?" We loved it.
Of course.
But then she goes, "And how much do we love Ed?" Just speaking for myself, not so much.
I feel like him and Emmy, it's just like it's like turn it down a couple notches. Like, I get it. You're hype. You're on TV. Cool. But, either way, though.
They both have that Big Brother shouting and confessional vibe, which I do not like,
Yeah.
But they split up. They win, but they split up. Ed decides to steal Tori, and Emmy decides to steal Devin, much to Devin's delight, because he likes being picked first overall.
Yep.
And then Coriel and Michelle are now partners.
I found it interesting because when I think of the switching of the partners, it's obvious the rookies see we need to be partnered with the vet because that gives us an extra layer of hopefully not being picked.
Yep.
Right. So, because at first, for a split second, I was like, oh, they're not staying together. I was kind of surprised. But then once you play it out, it's like, oh, of course. Yeah. It makes total sense to end up being with the vet.
Yeah. And also, I think their choices were well done. First of all, Tori and Devin are pretty competitive. Like they're not going to hold you back. You also have to consider there's some partnerships involving veterans that aren't going to succeed in the long run. And I think it's obvious. Like I think Ashley and Huey, they're not going to succeed in the long run. So it's okay to keep them together. Similarly, CT and Burnout, because of Berna's involvement with Nelson. Like you don't mind but seriously, like you don't mind Burna being with CT because if that disrupts CT's game, all the better. Whereas both Tori and Devin, I think it should be obvious to everyone in the house, they're both pretty well positioned in terms of alliances. And when the veterans turn on each other, I don't think Tori and Devin will be the ones drying that heat. I think it'll be Ashley, Nelson, Fessy, and certainly those three, I think, will be the first three in the veteran alliance to either turn on someone or be turned on. Probably Josh or Amber B. But yeah. I think those are the weak points in the veteran alliance, and I think Ed and Emmy have at least the sense to know that. The other safe person would be Anissa.
Yeah.
Right?
No, totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. We got some new teams. Emmy and Ed are the winners. They're all hyped. They're all energy. I'm going to say doing too much, but hey, as Ed said, it's the best feeling in the world, as he said. The best feeling in the world. Get it? Because it's a map of the world. Close quote. And that's where I thought he was bootleg Johnny Bananas.
You know, Sheldon, I heard that Ed was a genius in disguise, and yet he's making jokes like that.
Yeah.
What was your line of the episode, Sheldon?
Oh, there were lots, but I think I'm going to go with thank you, Mr. TJ.
I'm going with Kelz saying to Josh, no offense, but you're not known as the most strategic, tactical person.
Yeah.
Because I love it when Josh gets ethered in deliberation. And that was, it's just perfect.
Yeah.
Who killed it for you this week? That's a tough one for me.
It's a very tough one, but I got to say Ed, because I think Ed got put into a very tough position just coming into the house and automatically you get tossed in. And I'm convinced that he won that elimination for them. Right? Like he just was a good partner. He calmed her down because she was rattled going in, but he calmed her down. His positive energy seemed to wear off on her. He was just super hyped up, but did a good job in that elimination. And that was that.
I think for me, I'm going a little bit off the board. I think it's all the veteran men because Operation Get Kelz Out of the House worked pretty much flawlessly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they executed it perfectly, but they got the job done, which is what counts.
Result-driven business.
That's right. Where can people find you on social media?
Find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, Instagram Sheldon Alexander, and of course, like and subscribe to the pod as mentioned before. Hit that like button if you're listening or watching on YouTube. Follow the pod, search On Blast Podcast, get all our videos. What about you, my dude?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at J Chidley Hill. If you do follow me on Twitter, I hope you have an abiding interest in Canadian politics, because I'm covering the federal election to some degree. So you'll see some stories about that. And hey, if you're not Canadian, you're not interested in Canadian politics, maybe this would be an opportunity to learn about our bicameral legislature. You know.
What am I supposed to say to that? Amazing, man.
Until next week, this was You Killed It.
You killed